Gerald Ford was born on July 14, 1913 in Omaha, Nebraska, and was born as Leslie Lynch King Jr. His mother, Dorothy Eyre Gardner, who soon divorced the boy's father, who was a wife-beating alcoholic and had moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan. There, she met Gerald Rudolph Ford, the owner of a paint store, and married him in 1916. As a boy, his mother called him Junie until it became Jerry. Later in life, after he graduates high school, he will change his name to Gerald Rudolph Ford Jr. Gerald graduated from South High School in 1931. He excelled in history and government. He finished in the top 5% and was known to be most popular senior by his classmates. Gerald worked in a restaurant and was really good at football, which later helped him get admission into the University of Michigan. In college, he kept playing football and excelled greatly in his studies. The Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers wanted him to play for their team, but he refused both of them for law school. At this point, he has graduated and is looking to go to Yale to do law school. Fortunately for him, Yale needed a coach for their football team, which Gerald took and got paid $2,400 a year in 1935. He proved to be an excellent coach. He also coached boxing, which he wasn't familiar with. Yale was hard to get into, but eventually he did and graduated in the top third of his class on January of 1941. When he was back in Michigan, he opened a successful law practice with his friend Philip Buchan. At the same time, he became more interested in politics. As a Republican to begin with, he voted for Wendell Willkie, who ran against Franklin D. Roosevelt and lost. Attack on Pearl Harbor put Gerald's career on hold. He enlisted in the U.S. Navy and was called to duty on April 1942. In the Navy, he served 4 years, partly in South Pacific, and took part in some major battles and won 10 battle stars, proving to be a good leader and a dependable officer. After his time was up, he went back to Michigan and joined a different law firm and was still very interested in politics. There in Michigan, Ford met his wife Elizabeth Bloomer Warren, who was going through a divorce with her first husband. Soon after, they got married on October 15, 1948. In the next 9 years, they will have 4 kids: Michael Gerald, John Gardner, Stephen Meigs, and Susan Elizabeth, who are still living today.
Mr. Vice President, are you prepared to take the oath of office as President of the United States?
I am, sir.
If you will raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Gerald Ford took office on August 9, 1974, and had been the first vice president to take office under the terms of the 25th Amendment, which reads,
"In case of the removal of the president from office or of his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president."
Before he became president, Nixon's story was the one that brought him the president title. The Watergate scandal was a burglary. 5 thieves tried to break in, but were caught during the act by a security guard. Frank Willis was a young security guard on duty at the Watergate complex on the evening of June 17, 1972. The people that were caught were James W. McCord, Virgilio R. Gonzalez, Bernard L. Barker, Frank A. Sturgis, and Eugenio R. Martinez. As president, Ford had many almost impossible tasks, such as the energy crisis. During Nixon's time in office, he helped the Israeli army in the Yom Kippur War, which led to Arab hating America. That was a problem when Ford was president because they relied on foreign oil so much by then. Arab imposed embargo to all the countries that supported Israel, including America, thus banning all the oil that they sold before. Nixon administration later would negotiate peace between Israel and Syria. They also negotiated for the release of the embargo. After a long negotiation, Arab finally brought down the embargo on January 18, 1974.
It's my judgment that the détente with the Soviet Union will be continued, broadened, expanded. I think that's in our interest, and I think it's in the interest of the Soviet Union.
Another thing that Ford did was made it clear to the Soviets that despite Nixon's resignation, the United States still hoped to pursue détente. Détente is trying to decrease tensions between the Soviet Union and the United States that had existed since the end of World War II. It wasn't like complete trust or an alliance of any sort. It was a time where the two superpowers began to explore ways in which they could work together for both national security and economic goals. On August of 1975, Ford joined Leonid Brezhnev and the heads of other European nations to sign the Helsinki Accords, which were an agreement signed by 35 nations that concluded the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe held in Helsinki, Finland. The two major leaders also agreed in November 1974 to the Vladivostok Accords, which provided a general outline for a successor treaty for SALT I, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty, negotiated by Nixon and Kissinger in 1972. But other than that, nothing really improved because of differences over limits on Soviet bombers and American cruise missiles. The Vietnam War ended during Ford's time in office. When Nixon was president, he didn't really pay much attention to it, but Ford was willing to control the difficult situation. He sent $700 million in military and humanitarian assistance, which was far more than what Nixon requested. Another assault by the communist forces in the beginning of 1975 made Ford want to give more military aid to them, but Congress would only give humanitarian assistance. The end came when the communists overran South Vietnam's capital. Ford ordered all evacuation of his troops and anybody who had connections with the US. After that, he had to deal with tens of thousands of refugees from Vietnam. Another crisis was in Southeast Asia. In May 1975, Cambodian communists seized an American cargo ship, the Miyagis, and its 38 crew members. Ford was determined to demonstrate American toughness to both the world and US public, so he ordered a commando raid to free the crew. More than 40 Americans died in the mission, but the communists released the crew and abandoned the Miyagis in the middle of the US attack. Ford emerged unhurt after two separate assassination attempts in 1975, both of which occurred in California. As Ford greeted well-wishers outside the Senator Hotel in Sacramento, California, Lynette Fromm, age 26 and a follower of mass murderer Charles Manson, leveled a Colt 45 at Ford and squeezed the trigger at point-blank range. The gun misfired, and Fromm was wrestled to the ground before she could attempt a second shot. On September 22nd, just over 2 weeks later, he was fired on again with a .38 revolver in San Francisco by Sarah Jane Moore, who was age 45 and a one-time FBI informer. The shot missed Ford by a few feet. Both women were punished by lifetime imprisonment. Ford got released on January 20, 1977 as the 38th president and was followed by Jimmy Carter. Later, President Bill Clinton awarded 86-year-old Ford the Presidential Medal of Freedom in August 1999 in honor of his public service in binding the nation together after the nightmare of Watergate. Ford died on December 26, 2006 at his home in California. After a state funeral in Washington, D.C., he was buried in Grand Rapids, Michigan, on the grounds of the Gerald R. Ford Museum.
Stay in the light.